Hello and welcome to Long Beach Lens. I'm your host, Derek J. Simpson, Executive Director of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Our first guest on today's show is an author and psychotherapist. Please welcome Dr. Gerald Loren Fishkin. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me here today, Gary.
It's my pleasure. I was enjoying our conversation prior to the show and sharing who we are as Long Beach Community Action Partnership and learning more about you. But speaking about you, your father was a scientist and engineer. And
he was.
That was kind of the beginning of your inquisitive nature, I understand.
I learned it at his knee as a child to always look for what's happening, what's the important thing. And throughout college, I developed the idea, which is how I really kind of flew through college, is always look for the principle, the core element. What is the key concept? So throughout my life, and even in my clinical work, I look for the key concepts. What's actually going on? And that has certainly taken me into the writing career and always looking to find out what is really basically going on and how can we move the science of what's going on a little further.
And your specialty being psychology, and that's what you eventually went into. Right. And your practice is here in Long Beach.
Yes, it is, on Naples Island.
And you've been here quite a few years.
Since 1965. First as a student, and then as a assistant professor, and then associate professor at Long Beach City College.
Now, one of the things I read was that you're an expert in clinical forensic hypnosis.
Yeah.
I was intrigued by that. Explain a little bit.
I've done a lot of work with hypnosis and scene reconstruction, crime scene reconstruction, lost memory, issues like that help us find what's going on with an individual, and especially with memory. It's such a sensitive area, and hypnosis has been a way of helping to retrieve lost memories.
Now, was that, and I would imagine, because now CSI is the big thing,
right?
That was long before that show came on.
I started doing this back in the late '60s.
I would imagine what they talk about is based on some of the research and
a lot of it
such as people that yourself has done.
That's correct. True. Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Now, you've been on, as we were talking, hundreds of TV shows.
I've done hundreds of TV and radio shows.
Right. What generally were you speaking about in those? Was it your books prior to the one we're going to discuss? Or?
Right. Well, you know, in my background here in Long Beach, I was an assistant professor at Long Beach City College, and I was asked to come into the police academy and train. And that's how I got involved with law enforcement and the forensics part of it. And so I have been doing a lot of work with police and firefighters and such. And in 1986, I kind of got tired at my practice. I got offered an opportunity to write a book. My first book was Police Burnout. And it became a relative hit and took me across country a few times doing radio and TV. So I've always been involved with the media. I think the media is a great way of bringing ideas and concepts to the general public. It's different, you know, in working with one-on-one, as I have for the last 46 and a half years. You know, it's great working with individuals, but when I can work with the larger population and kind of help them deal with certain ideas or issues that they may be dealing with, then they can, you know, pursue whatever it is further. So I love the media. The media is a great tool for helping, you know, put forward these ideas, just like we're doing today.
Right, and I was also reading that in addition to your formal education, you feel that you learn quite a bit from your patients themselves.
I absolutely do, and actually that's what happened about 7 years ago. I started getting tired at work, and I wound up at a place in Arizona that works with shame. I never was trained in shame. And I realized that I had a bit of shame, and I went through a week's program there, and I realized, my God, we were never trained in shame in psychology and psychotherapy. Right. So I started a 5-year quest to find the key concepts, the core concepts of what shame was about. And it took me about that amount of time to kind of crystallize and conceptualize, and it turned into, my writings turned into this book, The Science of Shame and Its Treatment.
Yeah. And I happen to have a copy. We'll get a close-up of it, but at a later time. But tell us, so you have this context.
Right.
And
what happened in my clinical practice, and I've since found that many of my colleagues have experienced the same, about 40% of my patients who had addictions would drop out when we started talking about the family dynamic. And certainly you have to talk about family dynamics when you're treating. How do you know where this person came from? What informs them, what they're all about? And so what I found was that through my research and going through the program at the Meadows in Wickenburg, Arizona, that many of these people, most of these people, experience shame, but we could never tap it because I didn't understand it. So throughout the writing and all of this research that I did, I realized that shame is a key component that everybody has in their life, because shame lives in the brain. It lives in this area of the brain, in the what we call the basal ganglia, and that is just in that area of emotion we call the limbic system that feeds our emotions. So what I found is that shame is not only a neurological process, but it's a psychosocial process that affects so many people.
I read a quote. You said, guilt says I made a mistake, and shame says I am a mistake. That's a pretty powerful statement.
It's so powerful, it causes me to choke up, and that's because there is a huge difference between guilt and shame, and we use those terms coterminously, those guilt and shame, but they're not the same. They're not the same in the brain.
Right. I never would have thought of them as
no, and they're not the same in terms of the dynamic that feeds our personality. Guilt and shame are entirely different. And I think that my work is now focused on the shame component, the shame wounds that many people experience, especially those that have addictions.
And as I was looking through the book, you also talked about negative self-talk in that relationship to shame. Can you share more about
Derek,
that?
that's how this whole thing started. We all have self-talk. And I started to look at my own self-talk and how irrational and crazy it was. And when I realized going through my own program that this is my father's voice, you know, I'm not good enough. He never felt good enough, even though he was brilliant and highly decorated as a scientist. He never felt really good about himself. And he tended to pass that on to myself and my brother and my sister. So in the process of writing and going through certain processes and programs, I realized that the self-talk is very powerful. And that's how I started the whole notion of what is shame all about? And it's the self-talk is the part of shame that we can hear and see every minute of every day.
So when you think about the book, who would be a reader that you would recommend would get the most? Is this for any of us because we're all dealing with it, or is it a specific audience that you had in mind?
This was an issue when in the post-production of my book, who was our target? And the target is everyone, basically.
That's what it sounds
I had to slow down the neurological and bring up some of the, the social and psychosocial stuff. So it keeps keeps readers engaged. They can read. I think we have 11 case histories in there, and they all flow. And those are all from my clinical practice. But what we find is that my readers are everyone: priests, teachers. There's no boundary in terms of who is reading my book and giving me feedback about the book. I'm getting a lot of feedback all over the country.
Right. Now, where can one find the book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, where any bookseller. We're all over the country, and I understand now we're all over the world. And there is a digital version, so you can get it off the internet as well.
Okay. Another quote I wanted to share is, it says, ultimately, to live a full and meaningful life in the present, we have to let go of the past, stop blaming our parents or anyone else.
That's right.
It's really taking ownership of that baggage. We have to
take ownership, and we got to stop the shame-blame game at some point. But that tells us what's going on, really, from a clinical point of view. It tells me who they're blaming. That's who I look at when we get into this. But, people who are really shame-bound never feel good about themselves. Their self-talk is never kind, and it's always highly oppressive. But it's not really about who that individual is.
Right. Are there indicators, doctor, that we should look at?
Well, the first one are the addictions and mood disorders, because I typically find that in 100% of people with mood disorders and addictions have what we call toxic shame. They were abused, abandoned, neglected, violated in some way, and unprocessed trauma leads to shame and despair and depression. And so we really have to process the trauma. For most people, it was never processed. They never were able to work it through to develop a healthy sense of self, because it's all about the sense of self.
And I would imagine that this could be passed on from generation to generation.
What I'm finding, it's generational. I see three generations of shame-bound individuals and shame-based families.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it may go further than that.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I find is that shame becomes a training tool. And it's a terrible tool to train children. There are better ways of training.
Right, right. And I would think that that happens in the schools with our educators, unintentionally, I'm sure.
It does.
With friends,
right.
even.
It goes so far back, children should be seen and not heard.
Right.
That's shaming.
Right.
You know, even if the child is, has something to say and wants to be a part of that, what he sees going on in a family or in a family event. Right. But no, if the parent says, go to your room, Johnny, or you can sit here, but don't say anything. That's shaming.
We're down to less than 2 minutes. What's the takeaway that you want people who are watching now to know
I
about?
have a takeaway. The takeaway is that shame affects our sense of self. Okay. And to have a healthy, happy life, we have to feel good about our sense of self, who we are. And it's been my journey and my mission throughout my clinical career to help individuals work through that sense of self, to become a better, quote, version of who they are or could be, and to feel much better about themselves. They then go back into their families and the communities as a healthy person. And that's the goal, to create healthy, happy individuals. That's the whole takeaway. And that's why I write on burnout and I write on shame. But shame has become the major force, moving force in my life right now.
It's a paradigm that we all need to know more about, and I'm really intrigued. I started reading the book just the other day, and I thought, wow, things that you never think about or taken for granted are things that we should really consider seriously.
Shame has always been the elephant in the corner of the clinical office that we've never addressed.
Well, this book helps reveal that, for
Absolutely.
sure.
It smacks you in the face.
Thank you so much. We're out of time. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will be meeting with Karen Hilburn from the Sam Thompson Memorial Foundation for Disabled Jockeys. Stay tuned for more of Long Beach Lens.
Well, Mr. Pickles is the reason I started it. He's my corgi. Love him to death. Always wanted to take him to outings and meetup groups and everything. We decided to grab some friends of his off of Facebook and meet up at one place. And what better place than the beach? Started with 20 dogs. Word got out that we were doing it. More people wanted to come. Next thing you know, it's 50 dogs at the next one. 100 dogs at the next one. 200, 3, 5, 6. We're expecting 1,000 dogs here today. So really it just came out of my love for my dog and really just have a good time with them. Most of our proceeds go to Queen's Best Dumpy Dog Rescue. It's a corgi rescue based in Southern California. Doing great work. We just adopted out a dog today.
Simon's found his forever home. And I want to say thank you to these great people for adopting Simon. Thank you. What are you guys' names? Colin, Jack. Colin and Jack. Thank you, Colin and Jack. Simon is a beautiful dog with a lot of love and life in him, and these guys see it, and it's amazing.
It's just really touching, and it's really some hard to find home dogs, and some that other charities don't will overpass. Queen's Best will make sure that they get a home.
I'm here at the first time of Corgi Beach Day, and this is Perseus. He's my first tricolor, and this is Athena, a Swedish Valhund. He's my 6th Corgi since 20 years.
Why corgis? Can you explain what's the phenomenon, the corgi phenomenon?
I think corgis, everybody loves corgis because they look funny. Everybody loves their little funny butts. But really, really, once you get one, you realize that they're kind, loving, loyal dogs who just really like to have a good time. And they like to have a good time with each other, and that's why we're all here, to have a good time together. And there's no dogs fighting, have you noticed? They really all do get along great. We started in October 2012, so we're coming up on our 4-year anniversary this October. We also do a couple parades extra a year. We do Corgi Beach Day 3 times, a spring, summer, and a fall event. And then we also do, like I said, like a Christmas parade and some other little things here and there. This is Delilah.
Cord Washington!
This is Trinket, and we're at Corgi Beach Day.
Oh my goodness, how cute are you?
Welcome back. I'm Derek J. Simpson. Our next guest is from the Sam Thompson Memorial Foundation for Disabled Jockeys, and she's also a dear friend. Please welcome Miss Karen Hilburn. Hi, Karen.
Hi, how you doing?
Great, great. It's been
Good.
over a year or more
Yes,
since we've seen each other.
It has.
But for those who don't know you, like we know you here at Long Beach Cap, you were very involved in this community for many years in the Long Beach Unified School System. Tell us about that.
Well, probably my most important accomplishment with Long Beach Unified School District is that I was principal of Long Beach Poly High School in the 90s, and I worked at the central office for a number of years. Right. And then after I retired, I got involved with Long Beach Community Action Partnership.
Yeah, you're even our board chair for a while.
I was lucky enough to be elected to chair, and I served as chair of this fabulous organization for 4 years.
All right. What stood out in your mind, Karen, because this show is about not only people of interest and influence, but also about our mission. But as a former chair of the board, what stood out in your mind about the work that we did here?
Well, first of all, you had an incredible staff. We had a wonderful board. I don't need to tell you that you're a special person and a special man, and Long Beach Community Action Partnership is lucky to have you. But it was all the good that we did for young people. Yes, we did good for the community and for families, but my heart is with young people, and it was just incredible what we were able to do.
Thank you. Now, moving into the subject of what we're going to discuss, I know that one of your passions after you retired, and even maybe while you were working, were horses, and you got your first horse back in 2000. What inspired that?
I know. I got my first racehorse in 2000, and had a wonderful trainer. And when the first time that horse won, and I was in the winner's circle, I was hooked on horse racing.
Okay.
And then a few years later, I was lucky enough to find my own personal horse. I've loved horses my whole life.
Right.
Never owned a horse, never took a riding lesson. And I just decided one day, I'm going to learn how to ride. And then after a few months, I was lucky enough and found my wonderful riding horse named Copper.
And all of us here at Long Beach Cap know Copper.
That's right.
Copper's a Palomino.
Yes.
And tell us the Copper story.
A Copper is a beautiful golden Palomino. He's a quarter horse. He's taken good care of me. I didn't even know how to put a saddle on a horse. And he was young. 7 is young when I bought him. And he's an incredible horse. For those of you who haven't been around horses, there's an expression that some horses have an old soul, and it's like something else is inside them. And when a horse looks you in the eye, they know something, and it's different from your dog or your cat. And the most interesting thing, recently Copper developed bone-on-bone arthritis in what's called a fetlock, but it's his ankle. And he was becoming totally lame, and one day could hardly walk out of his stall. And I was lucky enough to get the best surgeon in the country and perform surgery on Copper 11 days ago. Oh, and he has a steel plate in his ankle and 17 screws and a cast.
Okay.
So
a horse with a cast.
And a cast.
Okay.
So
Never seen that.
no, never. I'd never seen a horse with a cast on either. But anyway, the prognosis is good.
Great. That's great news. Now, most importantly, one of the things as a result of your passion for horses and for jockeys and that whole culture in the equestrian life was creating the Sam Thompson Memorial Foundation.
Yes.
Tell us what that is and why that's so important.
Okay. Just a little bit about jockeys. Jockeys are incredibly proud people. They're incredible athletes. At most, when my personal horse was at his peak, he was maybe cantering at 10 miles an hour. The race horses run between 35 and 40 miles an hour, and they weigh 1,000 pounds. Jockeys are about my size or smaller. They're around 115 pounds. And they're incredible athletes. And my passion for horses and then horse racing turned to, I heard the story of a young man named Sam Thompson, who was one of the best quarter horse jockeys in the country. Quarter horses, for people who don't know, my personal horse is a riding quarter horse. A racing quarter horse, they're among the fastest on earth. They're like sprinters, and thoroughbreds are the long distance runners.
Gotcha.
And Sam was one of the best quarter horse riders jockeys in the nation. And in 2008, he was severely injured on the track at Los Alamitos. And 5 days later, on Christmas Day in 2008, his long-term partner, who is now my my trainer of my racehorses, Kristen Watanabe, had to make the decision to take Sam off life support and donate his organs. So we do know Sam is out here somewhere. But what I realized after I got to know Kristen, hired her as my trainer, that although most states have insurance plans for jockeys, some don't, but there are things that jockeys need once they're paralyzed that aren't covered by insurance. And because of my passion for young people, we're a new foundation. We're only 2 years old. And we also focus on the children of jockeys and scholarships in the education program for their children. And that's what makes us different.
Okay, and I noticed that the mission says a philanthropic organization focused on the health, education, and welfare of those involved with horse racing community.
Right.
So it's a holistic approach then
Yes.
to helping the family.
Yes.
And I saw in one of the pictures that you even had a special saddle, it looked like, to help those who may have been injured get back up on the horse.
Yes.
I remember once going to the tracks with you. It was like early in the morning, and to be that close to the rail and see those horses go by, and you can hear them breathing. It's the most majestic thing.
Yes.
One of the most majestic things I've ever seen in life. So when you say how small they are in comparison, you're right.
Right.
And I can't imagine being out there with 12 other horses as well.
No. And when you think about it, I can't make my horse do anything. He weighs 1,000 pounds. I'm 115 pounds. Horses are inherently drawn to humans and want praise, and they want to belong. They're herd animals, so they want to belong. And when you see the horses, what they do to please humans, it's unbelievable.
It is.
Just very briefly, the saddle that we bought is an incredible story. That jockey was injured, paralyzed 14 years ago, 2 months before the birth of his only child. And he's a very proud man and still works at the track, washing the horses, mucking the stalls, but from a wheelchair.
Wow.
And he said the only time he felt normal was when he was on a horse. And so he had a personal horse, and he used to tie himself into a regular saddle with a rope. And when we realized Oscar's story, that's when we had a special saddle made for him.
Right. So we're running low on time, and I want to make sure I get some key things. your board of directors is very distinguished.
Yes.
One name that stood out to me is Lafitte Pinkai.
Lafitte Pinkai.
Who's won the Kentucky Derby and
Yes,
run
yes.
other major. I mean, you've got a very distinguished
Yes.
board, and they're all helping you
Yes.
make this happen, correct?
Yes, Lafitte Pinkai is incredible supporter.
Yeah.
Another board member named Eddie Garcia won more races at Los Alamitos than any other jockey in history.
Wow. And so when people want to support the foundation, I know you have events coming up
Yes.
and you have different ways. How can anyone listening who has a passion for horses or just wants to get more involved because of what you're saying here, tell us some of the things that are going on.
Well, I just happen to bring information
just
that I'm
happen-
giving,
okay.
right, that I'm
Okay.
giving you. But we have several events every year, fundraisers, and we're having a fundraiser on October 13th, hosted by Grocery Outlet.
Okay.
And all of the information would be on our website, the stfoundation.org.
Okay.
And
S-T.
ST Foundation.
But it's the, right? The
Yeah,
is
I'm
part of
sorry.
it. So we'll put that
The.
on the screen later, but the ST Foundation. Okay.
.org. And when if anybody goes and checks our website, be prepared with Kleenex when you look at the story of Sam,
Right.
because that's also posted.
In the 1 minute that we have left or so, what's the takeaway that you want people to know about the foundation and what you're working on?
I want them to know that horses are just the most fabulous creatures. Jockeys and their families are dedicated. They're incredible athletes. And I don't think people realize how much they need support. We talk about all other sports, and sometimes I think that the racing business is overlooked. And we also want to focus on the youngsters of the jockeys.
Always got the kids in mind,
Right.
right? That's
You're right.
just who you are. And again, when I did make a visit to the track, it's like a whole city behind the
is.
scenes. I mean, their families are there, their living
Yes.
quarters.
Yes.
It's just an amazing thing, and I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing because that's amazing. And thank you for always supporting Long Beach Community Action Partnership.
Always, and always supporting you, Derek.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks.
righty.
So I'd like to thank Dr. Gerald, Loren Fishkin, and Ms. Karen Hilburn for joining us on today's show. Be sure to follow PatNet TV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest updates. We also welcome your comments and thoughts regarding this show as we strive to make Long Beach Lens a favorite source of local news, information, and entertainment. This show has been brought to you with support from the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Thank you for watching Long Beach Lens.